Well, this week on Triple G, we're doing Glamour. So I had some makeup on and my hair done.
Hey Eric, I noticed those grammar notes you were looking for.
Glamour?
Get grammar.
Not Glamour?
Who's Glamour?
I thought we agreed on Glamour.
Grammar. What you doing over there?
That's Glamour.
You know what? Coffee and running car outside. Be right back, buddy. Just one sec.
So, I'm sure you were, YLU''RE, you are all wondering why I'm dressed like this for a grammar lesson. Well,
Hello, everybody. Eric's indisposed at the moment, so I'm gonna lead you into this episode. It's called Eric's got the title. He'll get you later. But welcome to Triple G.
I'm here to talk to you about the greatest rock band of the past 20 years, the Foo Fighters. More specifically, Dave Grohl. But I just don't want to talk about Dave Grohl, because if I just talk about Dave Grohl, I'll go on probably like a 2-hour butt kiss fest, and you guys don't want to hear that. And, you know, maybe some of you want to hear that, depending on how big your man crushes with Dave Grohl are. It's a shame we have to die, my dear. In an era now where really no good rock bands exist or can seem to pull it together to last, Dave and the Foo Fighters have trudged on where others have failed. But even like the worst song on their weakest album is still better than 90% of anything you'll hear. So I think that really says something about them. So really, aside from anything else I can say, I know you've heard them, I know you've seen them. They've been around long enough for you not to. If you aren't listening to the Foo Fighters, you should be. I own Color in the Shape, Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace, and Wasting Light, and they're all brilliant. They're all well worth your money. So please, do rock and roll a favor, listen to the Foo Fighters. For those of you who may know what this is, then I applaud you. And for those that don't, then you missed out on something really awesome and something that could have just made your video game life complete. It is a Nintendo 64, and for the most part of the early 2000s, this is what I was doing. Now, to me, it didn't matter that there was a powerhouse in Sony coming out with the PlayStation and all of its disc games, because I was still a console guy. I know it's a console too, I was still a cartridge guy. I'm very much a cartridge guy, and I grew up on the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and the Nintendo 64, so I never got into the PlayStation. PlayStation 2 came around and kind of wooed me into discs and next gens, but this here was the pinnacle at the time for gaming for me. Games like Shadows of the Empire. The only crossover I ever played on the 64 was Resident Evil 2, and it's still one of my favorites. No Mercy. Still, to this day, probably the second, if not the best wrestling game ever made. Ever. The pinnacle, Mario 64. You know, if there's one beef that anybody could really have with the Nintendo 64, it was this wholly over-the-top, what is this controller? You know, with a lot of the games it worked, but it was still just a pain to hold. Do I hold it here? Do I hold it here? I put 1 ear on it. It's minor, because it's still one of the best consoles ever. In conclusion, there's a lot of hype about next gens and PlayStation 4s and Xbox 720s, and you know, the current generation systems are great, but you can't beat classic gameplay, good stories, and classic characters that will never die. This is the closest I'll ever read a Batman. But in Britain, there actually was a guy who dressed like a Batman and brought in a criminal, charged for theft and burglary. The guy was actually decked out in a cape cowl and the big bat symbol, so apparently Bruce didn't just go to France, he went over to Britain too, because Batman exists.
Alright, about last week the new Spider-Man suit was revealed, and while I like the one in the Amazing Spider-Man, I thought it was pretty cool, not as cool as the original one, but the new one looks a lot like it's influenced by the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, which I'm a huge fan of. I love the new eyes, I think it's going to look great on screen, I'm very excited for it.
And good news, everybody, for all of you who know what Whose Line Is It Anyway is, amazing British humor show that was brought over to America and hosted by Drew Carey, but it's a improv variety show that's got like Ryan Stiles, Wayne Brady was in it, Colin Mockery, hilarious guys. I just think of the coolest stuff to laugh about, and it's coming back. I don't know when, but I am super excited.
Alright, so the other day during a press junket for Oz the Great and the Powerful, Sam Raimi was talked about the Evil Dead 4 writing with his brother this summer. Said he was kind of forced into it by the fans, but I think he's going to get the itch, especially with the remake coming out. So maybe we'll finally get an Evil Dead 4, although it's going to be kind of confusing now that the remake is coming out. But I'll still sell for an Evil Dead 4 and an Evil Dead remake. They both look great.
Okay, this is the point where I want to thank everybody for 10 episodes. I was going for epic with episode 10 and I'm not sure we reached it. I really can't believe we can't think of a third G since Grapplers.
I know, I've been thinking about it for a while too.
I don't know what to do anymore.
I'm just really surprised that a couple of geeks like us can't figure it out.
Wait, what? Geeks?
Geeks?
Geek.
You got a great idea with geeks.
Games, guitars, and geek.
I like it.
Triple G!
Triple G!
Back in effect. Games, guitars, and geek. Come back next episode, episode 11. You are going to love it. Peace!